Fall of Constantinople. In 1453, the Ottoman Empire finally captured Constantinople after an 800-year-old Byzantine Empire failed to defend it, using massive cannons specifically built to smash through walls that had stood for over 1,000 years. The city's fall cut off traditional European land trade routes to Asia, and that single disruption is directly why European explorers started sailing west looking for a new path to Asian spices, accidentally bumping into the Americas along the way. Greek scholars fleeing the fallen city carried ancient texts westward into Italy, dumping a massive load of classical knowledge onto Europe at the exact moment the Renaissance was starting to catch fire. Reconquista. Not one battle, but a 700-year-long campaign, from 711 to 1492, where Christian kingdoms slowly clawed back the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule one territory at a time. The very same year it finally finished, 1492, the newly unified Spanish crown funded Christopher Columbus's voyage across the Atlantic, meaning the money and momentum that discovered the Americas came directly from finally winning a war that had been dragging on since before most European countries even existed. The Reconquista also produced the Spanish Inquisition, a brutal religious enforcement system created to root out anyone suspected of secretly practicing their old faith after forced conversions. 30 Years' War, fought from 1618 to 1648, primarily across Germany. This religious-turned-political war killed an estimated 8 million people, with some German regions losing over half their population to combat, famine, and disease. What began as a Catholic versus Protestant conflict spiraled into a chaotic free-for-all involving nearly every major European power fighting for territory and influence. It ended with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, a treaty so influential it essentially invented the modern nation-state. The idea that a country controls its own internal affairs without outside interference, a rule that still underpins international law today. 7 Years' War, fought from 1756 to 1763 across Europe, North America, and Asia. Historians often call this the actual first true world war, since fighting broke out on nearly every populated continent simultaneously. Britain's victory over France stripped away most of France's territory in North America and India, setting Britain up to become the dominant global superpower for the next century and a half. The war also left Britain deeply in debt, and the taxes they raised on American colonists to pay it off directly triggered the resentment that sparked the American Revolution barely a decade later. American Revolution, fought from 1775 to 1783, 13 British colonies rejected the idea of no taxation without representation and won full independence with critical help from France, who joined mainly to spite their longtime rival Britain rather than out of love for democracy. The resulting United States Constitution, ratified in 1789, became the first major government in modern history, built around the idea that power comes from the people rather than a king or God-given right. The revolution's success directly inspired the French Revolution just 6 years later, proving that ordinary citizens really could overthrow entrenched monarchy. French Revolution. Beginning in 1789 and starving, heavily taxed French population overthrew centuries of absolute monarchy, eventually executing King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette by guillotine in front of massive public crowds. The revolution spiraled into the Reign of Terror, where the new government executed an estimated 17,000 people in under a year, often for nothing more than being suspected of disloyalty. Despite the chaos, the revolution permanently spread ideas like legal equality, secular government, and citizenship rights across Europe, and it directly created the power vacuum that a young artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte would soon fill. If you're keeping score of how many revolutions it took to build modern government, smash that like button. It's faster than storming a monarchy. Drop a comment with which conflict on this list hits hardest so far, and subscribe because the next 6 get significantly bloodier. Opium Wars, fought between Britain and China across 2 separate conflicts. From 1839 to 1860, this war started because Britain was illegally smuggling opium into China to fix a trade imbalance. And when China tried to stop it, Britain declared war to protect their drug trafficking profits. China lost badly both times, forced to sign deeply humiliating treaties that handed Hong Kong to Britain and opened Chinese ports to foreign control for over a century. This era, still remembered in China as the century of humiliation, directly fuels modern Chinese foreign policy and their intense focus on never again being militarily dominated by outside powers. American Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, this remains the deadliest war in American history, killing more soldiers than World War I and World War II combined. Fought fundamentally over slavery despite decades of attempts to reframe it as purely about states' rights. It introduced repeating rifles, ironclad warships, and trench warfare tactics decades before World War I made those same tactics infamous worldwide. The Union's victory preserved the United States as one nation and led directly to the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, though full racial equality remained a fight for the following century. World War I. Sparked in 1914 by a single assassination in Sarajevo, a tangled web of military alliances dragged nearly every major world power into 4 years of industrialized slaughter, killing over 17 million people total. Soldiers fought and died over mere yards of muddy trench territory, while machine guns, poison gas, tanks, and aircraft made their first horrifying appearance in warfare. The brutal Treaty of Versailles that ended the war in 1919 punished Germany so severely, with reparations and territorial loss, that historians widely consider it a direct spark for the resentment that fueled Hitler's rise barely 20 years later. Russian Revolution. In 1917, a starving, war-exhausted population overthrew a 300-year-old Russian monarchy within days, only for power to be seized months later by Vladimir Lenin's Bolsheviks, a radical communist faction promising to abolish private property and class hierarchy entirely. The revolution triggered a brutal civil war and created the Soviet Union, the world's first major communist superpower. This single event effectively split the entire 20th century into two competing ideological camps, setting up a global rivalry that would shape nearly every conflict for the next 70 years. World War II. The deadliest conflict in human history, running from 1939 to 1945, killing an estimated 70 to 85 million people, roughly 3% of the entire global population at the time. It included the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews, and millions of other targeted victims, and ended with the only 2 nuclear weapons ever used in actual warfare, dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The war bankrupted Europe's old colonial empires and elevated the United States and Soviet Union into the world's 2 dominant superpowers, directly leading to the creation of the United Nations to try preventing a third global war. Cold War, a 45-year standoff from 1947 to 1991 between the United States and Soviet Union that never involved direct combat between the 2 powers themselves, yet shaped nearly every global conflict of the 20th century through proxy wars, espionage, and a terrifying nuclear arms race. At its peak, both sides stockpiled enough nuclear weapons to destroy human civilization multiple times over under a strategy chillingly nicknamed Mutually Assured Destruction, an acronym that spells MAD without a hint of irony. It finally ended with the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991. Leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower and shaping the political alliances that still define global politics today. None of these 12 conflicts happened in isolation. Each one created the exact conditions that made the next one possible, a direct chain reaction stretching from a besieged medieval city all the way to nuclear-armed superpowers glaring at each other across an ocean. Understanding history this way isn't about memorizing dates. It's about seeing how the modern world was quite literally built out of consequences nobody at the time saw coming. Comment which conflict from this list you're most surprised made the cut. Hit like if this rewired how you think about modern borders and politics. And subscribe for the next rapid-fire history breakdown.